Hello there, Andy's Toys and various people around the world, and welcome back to another episode of the Silver Screen podcast, where we take a look at a film that's usually relevant to things that are coming out in the cinema. Just to deal with some of the housekeeping things first, unfortunately, we were supposed to be joined by my regular co-host DK, but it turns out his internet connection had other ideas. It's been less than kind to us, and so he's had to, unfortunately, just sit this one out because it was a losing battle. The delays and the interruptions were just too much. But thankfully, I am still joined by a guest, so it's not going to be just me. It will be a two-person review, but it's going to be me and a familiar face. It's going to be Will Templar again. Hello, Will.
Quick, the walls are closing in. No, well, half your audience has just clicked off. You're like, oh, this prick again.
Well, you say that, but every episode you're on gets hundreds of views. So
what can I say? I don't know.
Exactly.
Thank you for tuning in. Like, awesome, subscribe, and peace. Goodbye. No,
exactly. So no, yeah, Will's joining us again from his big screen podcast. Sort of celebration of the release, I think tomorrow when this airs, of the new movie Lightyear. We decided we would be going back and looking at one of the Toy Story movies, and knowing that Will was going to be the guest, I basically asked him to pick which one he wanted to review, and he decided we were going to review Toy Story 2, which seems kind of fitting if we're relating it to Lightyear, because it is the one where we're introduced to Emperor Zurg and some of the Buzz Lightyear backstory, so why not? So
well, the concept of Zurg was introduced in Toy Story 1, wasn't it? But then it was kind of explored more in Toy Story 2. I believe so. Like, Zurg was mentioned because of course, Buzz had like an ulterior motive when he was first introduced to Woody and whatever, and he was talking about like a mission he was on to defeat Zurg or something like that, and that's why the second movie opens with him defeating Zurg, and then it's like a twist with him being in a video game or whatever. I think that's
good.
I mean,
I like that. Awesome. See, I should have watched the first one again. I didn't rewatch the first one, you see, before we went into this. I only watched the second one, so.
Yeah. Well, for the ladies and gentlemen, I hadn't seen the first one. I only seen the second, third, and fourth film prior to this year. So whenever I caught it on BBC One, for example, I turned on the first film, and it was like, so especially the kid, was the name Sid? Sid, the antagonist guy in
the neighbor, yeah.
Yeah, whenever I looked at him, I was like, this looks dreadful. I'm going to switch off now. I'll just stick with my favorite nostalgic film, Toy Story 2. And this is why I chose Toy Story 2 to review, because it was my favorite. But then I was doing like I said on Twitter, I was going to it's Pixar, right? A Pixar marathon. So Toy Story 1, A Bug's Life, Toy Story 2, then Monsters Inc. or whatever the chronological linearness of it.
I think that's right. Yeah, Toy Story, Bugs Life, Toy Story 2, then Monsters Inc. I believe are the first four.
Oh, okay, so I got that far into it with no ill, but I only got around to Toy Story 1, then I gave up. So I watched Toy Story.
Literally the first one.
Yeah, because I just had no desire to get into Bugs Life. But yeah,
okay, fair enough. I still haven't seen that one, which DK wasn't happy at me when I told him.
Wow, that makes two of us.
Sorry about that. I'll get to it. I haven't seen any of the Monsters Inc. films or anything.
Oh wow, really? I've seen like passing viewer on that, like more casual, but I have seen them on TV. But with A Bug's Life, it was like we said off air. It's my favorite of the clips at the end during the credits.
Yeah.
The Bug's Life was like, oh, well, how can we get our own sequel? Wow, talking about sequels, and then the characters from Toy Story come through. Like, no, this is our sequel.
Shop them through.
Yeah, it was my favorite. It was my favorite. So I will give it a go based on that.
That's fair enough. The next section we're going to jump straight into would normally be DK's realm, but as his internet is not allowing him to communicate very well, we are going to hand it over to me for this week, and we're going to do the behind the scenes. Just some little random bits and pieces of information about Toy Story 2 that you may or may not know. There's not a lot of information, but there's some interesting things that I did want to touch on. The first one of which, in no particular order, is that I don't know if you know this, Will, we were discussing it beforehand. Somebody on Twitter pointed out that a lot of the animation for this was done within 9 months. That was the overall,
I wonder who that was.
Yeah, our friend Jamie. So yeah, it was very quickly done, but the movie very nearly didn't happen because the film was lost partway through the animation process. There's actually a documentary on the Blu-ray, one of the special features about this, and they were very fortunate that one of the animators was pregnant and was working from home, so she took a full copy of what they'd done so far home with her and had it as a backup. So we have this particular, and I'm really sorry, I can't remember her name, but this particular Pixar worker to thank for the fact that they didn't have to just like start from scratch about halfway through everything and didn't lose the film because something had went wrong with the computers.
I did know that fact. I wasn't sure which Toy Story film to attribute it to. So I was like, when I saw Jamie made the tweet about, it's been 9 months, I assumed, okay, so maybe the fact was for Toy Story 2, and perhaps they had 9 months because they had to stick to the deadline, but they had less time to animate, so it was quite rushed. But apparently no, because they had the copy. And now I'm remembering it. I do remember that fact.
Yeah, that's fun. What was I going to say? The other fact that I have, and again we talked about this off air, there is during these sort of the fake gag reel, I guess, at the end, the sort of false outtakes that they've animated. There is one that if you're watching the movie on streaming, you won't see anymore that was originally in the film. And it's a scene where the Prospector character, voiced by Kelsey Grammer, is basically hitting on 2 Barbie dolls and sort of, you're twins, are you? This is fascinating. I can get you a role in Toy Story 3. And because of the whole kind of casting couch reference around the time of the Me Too movement and what happened with Harvey Weinstein, coupled with naturally what happened with kind of John Lasseter and very unfortunate accusations of inappropriate behavior on his part, that scene has now been removed. So if you've watched on sort of Disney Plus or iPlayer or any of the streaming services, you won't see that particular gag, but it is still present on the DVD and Blu-ray releases. Random fascinating things that I found out.
We watched on Disney Plus and I watched on BBC iPlayer, and it was cut from both. So yeah.
Well, I watched it on Blu-ray, but I went back because I was curious when I read that it had been cut, and I was like, well, I'm going to check for myself because I wouldn't just say that and then turns out it's not true. So yeah, I checked on Disney Plus; it definitely is gone. So weird. The third fact I wanted to give is that the cleaner, in quotes, who comes to kind of fix Woody and fix up the toys, is the character Jerry from Jerry's Game, which was a previous Pixar short that had already come out. So he's an existing character, which is pretty cool if you're a Pixar fan. And on a similar note to that, when they're flicking through the channels, trying to find the Al's Toy Barn commercial, all of the channels are showing Pixar's previous shorts. There's nothing else. It's just previous clips from their short movies, which again, if you're a buff, it's really cool to kind of, you can spot the short that they're actually flicking to as the channels go by. So it's kind of fun. And I believe that may have been almost all of the facts that I had. I can't really remember anything else. Probably will end up remembering something that I've forgotten, but no, I think that was more or less everything.
I do love the memes that this film was generated. When it was flicking through the channels, that's always posted on Netflix, on bloody Netflix, on Snapchat and TikTok. It's like point of view. You're looking through a girl's Snapchat after they've been on a night out, and they're flicking through all the stories. Like they've posted so much of the nightclub. Let's just get through. And it's funny in retrospect.
Yeah, I mean it's a known movie, and I think a lot of it depends on like how old you were when you first saw it and how it hit you. But we'll get into all of that. We'll go into the review of the film now properly. We just kind of do it more loosely now rather than doing it chronologically. So it's ideally splits into categories like acting, writing, direction, music, etc. But we are also very kind of free-form, and so if the conversation takes us to a particular scene or a moment, then we're happy to go and talk about that rather than waiting or whatever. So, but before any of that, we always start off with just what are your kind of memories of seeing this movie, Will? Do you recall the first time you saw it, and what were you expecting going in for the rewatch on this one?
My friend, I have watched this film so many times. Oh my god, I must have watched this film about 6 or 7 times. I cannot remember the first time I watched it. I must have been about 2 or 3, which is pretty funny because you were probably 23 when you first watched it, or something like that. But yeah, something like that, to be fair. So yeah, I can't remember, but I do think I misremembered a couple of small details of this film, which is natural. You're gonna think something was a bit more tense or whatever. Some scenes,
things hit you differently when you're younger, obviously, don't they?
Yeah. Well, in terms of, there were some moments like when he's in the game again, and the camera comes out of the the rock and whatever, and then it turns and looks at Buzz. I thought that scene was a little bit longer, for example, so it kind of had a bit more tension to it. But then when I was rewatching, I was like, oh, okay, no, it just turns straight around, and then there's no road intensity. It's just like, oh, he hasn't seen it, and now he's seen it. Oh well, let's move on to the next thing. But other than that, I think I noticed there was far more jokes. Like, for example, in the first 10-20 minutes before we actually get to the meat of the plot and to like the plot points or whatever, every single exchange of dialogue had a payoff. It was like it had a joke at the end of it, and I really appreciate that, because whilst it's meant to be like a children's movie and whatever, it's like meant to be funny, you can still appreciate that as an adult, like just the continual jokes. And I think it's very family oriented, I think.
Definitely. Yeah, well, related to that, I mean, viewing this as a kind of more critical lens now, I appreciate the way, like, how tight the writing is and how everything kind of has a point. Nothing's frivolous. It's all kind of set up for things that are going to happen later, or it becomes relevant to something later on. So even when it seems like it's not, like at the very start in Andy's room and everything, it will come back full circle at the end, and everything will have its purpose. And I kind of like a plot like that where there's no kind of loose ends, and there's no like wheat from the chaff, as they say, or whatever. So, I mean, the film is only 90 minutes long, which, that's probably part of the reason for that. But I think...
the pacing of it is absolutely superb. It flies from one thing to another really quickly.
Yeah, maybe too fast, if anything, though, because it doesn't seem like a lot of the more emotional scenes have a chance to breathe. And I think that's maybe what you were saying with, you remembered like that one random thing being a bit longer and quicker. Longer and more impactful. And I was the same. I remembered kind of Jessie's like fear of abandonment and her kind of sad song and stuff being a lot more drawn out and a lot more impactful. And yet on this watch, it was kind of like just there and done, I guess.
I just never liked that in general. I never liked that scene. When I was a kid growing up, I was like, oh, this is the skip scene. This is the scene I always skip. And I was watching it this time and I thought, it's still that, like, for me, it's too drawn out. So we see this a bit differently. I just think because it's so quick, the sudden switch to something more melodramatic and slow, and the song, the actual use of not a pop song, just like a more slow song, it just kind of took me out of it a bit. It didn't take me out of it. It was just like quite disappointing in that sense, because it didn't really hit for me. And like before that, I think a large part of it is like before that montage.
Hello,
DK. Hello.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Is this working?
Oh my
now?
word! It's working.
Holy shit! Just give me a sec.
No worries. But I do think a large part of that montage didn't work, just because I found Jessie quite an unlikable character. Up until
we are going to definitely differ on that one.
Like when I saw you put out a poll for the audience interaction or whatever, it's like, who's your favorite Toy Story character? And it's like Woody, Buzz, and Jessie. And I was like, well, Jessie only got one vote, and I was like, I bet my money it is Michael, because Michael likes Jessie, I suppose, and I guess right. But it's like
not overall. I mean, not in the overall franchise, but this is, for my money, this is Jessie's movie, and this is her story, and that's the kind of that's the crux of it. The overall point of it is emphasized by her, and it's the movie that introduces her, but it's also, like I said, it's the one that introduces the concept, which I think was done better when it develops more in 3, but it introduces the idea of, yes, you're a toy and you're loved and everything now, but that can't last forever. And what happens,
that's why I prefer her in 3. Like in this film, the only time I was actually rooting for her was in the final sequences, and from the point of when Woody's been rescued by Stinky Pete. Stinky Pete's gone off with that Barbie doll or whatever, and then Woody's like saved and whatever, and then we see Jessie go down the slipwire or whatever down towards the plane cargo. That was the first time I kind of rooted for her. It's like, okay, our protagonist is being rescued. Now our attention is on rescuing this other person. I thought, yeah, let's do it. But before that, I was just like, she's very bitchy. She's like, oh, Andy. Oh, precious Andy. And I don't
see that. She wasn't very likable at first.
Exactly. She was not likable. She was so snarky. When she was introduced, she was a load of fun. But then when she kind of descended into a more sad character, she took it out on Woody, and he's the protagonist. He's the one we're rooting for. So introducing a new character by having her slam down the guy we know, it was just quite.
But that was this is where I really struggled, because this is maybe I just empathized more with her, but that was kind of the whole point. Like, I never saw it as being bitchy. I genuinely felt bad for her that she was like, oh well, yeah, you're gonna run off and do your thing, and we're gonna be put in storage, and that's like a fate worse than death, kind of thing.
Once she had the scene, once she had a flashback, she became more empathic. But up until that point, she was a bit,
yeah, exactly. It was like she had no not resentment. She should have understood where Woody was coming from on the off.
Well, but why did he didn't understand where she was coming from? So why is it up to her to understand him?
Because Woody was explaining to her that he's got an owner, and then Jessie also had an owner, but she's not empathetic to the fact that he had an owner. Do you know what I mean? And then we had a montage, and then they both became understanding of each other and their mutual pain or whatever. But when he said, "I've got an owner," she just became snarky and whatever. And I guess that's
because that's her pain.
That's the point of like. Yeah. I know, but it was just like it didn't work before the montage, and even after the montage, the focus goes away from her because that's when the toys come back and the attention's back on Woody, and then again. When Woody's saved, the attention goes back to Jessie, and then at the end, in that final 20-minute sequence, that's when I feel stuff for Jessie, and that's when it really matters. That's the climax, and I think that's what the turning point is supposed to be. But obviously, you resonated with her from really early on.
Yeah, well, that's where I would differ. But then, everybody, welcome back, DK, who seems to have fixed his internet problems. Welcome back,
hello,
buddy.
DK.
Howdy.
Since you're here, then, DK, what do you have an opinion on this kind of debate we're having about like Jessie as a character, or is it just what you had said that kind of you didn't find her all that likable until she explained herself with the song and everything, and then it came into its own?
Like Will said, when she first appeared, she was a likable character, and then when the sour grapes kind of crept into her character, it let it down a little, so you didn't kind of root for her as much. It wasn't until that scene that you thought, oh, okay, see where she's coming from now.
Fair enough.
But it still didn't excuse the way she was treating Woody. I mean, I can understand why she was resentful, but it didn't come across in a very pleasant way.
I don't have an issue with it, which is probably where I'll differ from you two, because I think I feel for where she's coming from, and for me, I'm perfectly on board with the idea of that she doesn't want to go back into storage, basically, at the end of the day. And like I said, the fact that the best excuse he can give for why she's going to go through that punishment is, well, I have an owner. And she's like, well, yeah, so did I. But, so you're going to damn me to this kind of horror because you're going to go and have an extra, few years with your buddy who'll abandon you and whatever. So to me, it kind of all sprung from her character. And yeah, for the purpose of bringing it back to the section about acting, I also thought Joan Cusack did a really good job, because she's one of the few voice actors where it's almost hard to recognize that it's her. Like, as much as I love the other performances, you can kind of tell that Woody is Tom Hanks, and you can tell that Buzz is Tim Allen and whatever else. But Joan Cusack, I think, is the only one really who's playing a character who kind of loses herself in that, not to sound all kind of pompous about it. So I thought I really was impressed with her performance as well. So you guys don't agree, I presume?
No. I mean, I like Joan Cusack, but you could tell that it was John, in my opinion anyway, you could tell it was John Cusack as soon as she started speaking.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. I just thought, like, because she's so, I've only ever really seen her in like dramas and indie movies and stuff. So when she was being like, wow, look, it's Woody and everything, I was like, this doesn't sound anything like the actress that I know, because I've never really seen her in anything that high energy, I guess. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. I'll just go through a few notes I have on the acting, and then I'll get you guys' opinions. It's nice to still see Bo Peep and Annie Potts in this movie before she sits out the third one and comes back in the fourth, obviously. I think the late, great R. Lee Ermey, casting him as the leader of the soldiers in all of the movies is just a stroke of genius, because it's so funny, just the idea of like this hard-ass general leading the toy soldiers, that you don't even really need to make a joke there. And yeah, the only other casting note I have is that how weird is it that we're once again talking about Wayne Knight playing the bad guy as Al from Al's Toy Barn, after we were just talking Jurassic World in our last episode. And of course, we might know him as Dennis Nedry from Jurassic Park, or Newman from Seinfeld, or numerous other things. So, So yeah,
that's maybe where I recognize the voice from, because the voice just resonates with me so much. He's got such a great voice.
Yeah. He's very much just the one voice, so in fairness,
Yeah,
but yeah.
Buck. Oh man, I love it. The whole chicken soup thing. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Draw that chicken. So what did you think about did you guys have any thoughts on the acting, either of you guys, or anything you wanted to shout out?
I think Tim Allen was fantastic.
Yeah,
he's always
I have to kind of admit he's great at playing the kind of daring do cocky hero guy. So.
Yeah, I love the dynamic with the two Buzz Lightyears. I thought that was really good. I was quite disappointed with how that kind of wrapped up with the quote unquote fake Buzz. Like he gets really, like, I was like, okay, how are they going to write this out? Because they're en route to Andy's house now, but they can't have two of them. And then all of a sudden, it's like it's the Star Wars reference. You are my father. No.
Yeah.
And then they go to the bomb, and then it's like, oh, are you coming, Buzz? No, I'm going to play catch with my father. And I just thought, so that's how they're doing it. But that is really quick, and that is really out of nowhere.
I forgive that though, because it's really funny. Because it's just it's the last thing you expect, isn't it? Like, from based on the Star Wars thing, you don't expect that it's going to be like, oh wow, Dad, and so it's like, all right, if you're going to pay it off with a quick gag while acknowledging that he can't go with you, then fair enough. So I think I appreciated that a little bit more than you.
I know it's technically not the actors, it's technically the animation. Well, the animation's acting, let's say. I did love the particular moment where it's a little touch. There's the little things in this movie that really stand out, because, like you said yesterday, there's not really much you can really write about this film. It's like, this scene works for you. This scene maybe works for this reason. It didn't work for that reason, whatever. One of the little animation touches I noticed is when the yard sale is happening and the mother is coming around collecting the toys. And it's like when she's going around Rex, she moves Rex and then she picks up something beside him. I like how they animated the eyes and like to show the nervousness and him moving his eyes to follow the thing that was being picked up. I just like that sense of anxiety from Rex. And I thought it was quite funny because it was played off as a joke and it was quite brilliant in my opinion.
Yeah, the kind of the inner life that the toys have is very well done in all of the movies, because, as you say, the idea that the people don't know that they're... I mean, it's weird, but the people that don't know that they're alive and sentient, and so they have to act like toys, but then, as you say, we know they have this rich inner life, so...
It's Toy Story 3. It's Toy Story 3, the one that opens with them on a train.
Yes, it is, yeah.
I'm looking forward to rewatching that one. I want to know how that
I really like Toy Story 3. I will say, related to what you were talking about earlier, just to mention it, I do think... As much as I like Buzz Lightyear's plot in this one and the kind of the Zurg Star Wars thing and the meeting another Buzz who calls back to the original movie because he doesn't know he's a toy and stuff, I much prefer Buzz Lightyear's plot in the third movie when he randomly switches into Spanish mode and he just becomes like this Spanish-speaking Lothario and everything. And it's like, that to me is a funnier kind of idea as a plot device. And like, just the ingenious idea of like, well, a toy might have this kind of mode and what would happen if you switched it like that. So,
I did like the subtle. I mean, forgive me if you guys have touched upon it, because obviously I've missed a bit. I did like the little subtle joke when the original Buzz Lightyear climbs up, finds the newer version with the tool belt, and gets really.
Was I really like this?
Yeah, but it's the thing where he's envious of the tool belt, thinking back to the roles that Tim Allen played before.
Yeah, I never picked up on that, but yeah, I guess that's the point. Yeah, fair enough. I'd say I from a pragmatic standpoint, I was just watching it going, I know for a fact you've done this purely so the audience can differentiate between the two Buzzes, otherwise it would get confusing. So we know that the one who thinks he's a toy has the utility belt and our Buzz doesn't, kind of thing. But slight little joke to get in there, I guess.
Even when they were fighting, it was quite difficult to tell which one was which.
Yeah, definitely. But that was the point, wasn't it? So
yeah.
I think that I may as well get into this now, though. I think that's kind of a symptom of one of the slight criticisms I might make about this movie. Apologies if you love it, you don't want to hear any criticisms, but I think it relies a little bit too much at times on nostalgia for the movie that's just before it. So there's a lot of things where it seems like they're forcing in references to what's gone before, and I appreciate them carrying on in the same universe. So I even put on my notes, like, I like that it carries on and we still have the dog who's with the family who we'd seen at kind of the last joke of the first movie, and they mention what happened and Woody came for me at one point and everything. But like I say, I think there's times when using the Buzz Lightyear doesn't know he's a toy thing again as a plot line, and then at the end when they like randomly come across like the Pizza Planet truck and the aliens and stuff, I was like, all right, this is getting a little bit forced now for kind of like, do you remember that first movie?
Yeah, I got that kind of sense when they reintroduced the aliens. I did like the whole, because of what DK said, it was like a joke when Buzz got introduced, like the other Buzz. So it's like I can respect that innocence of they're just playing it for a joke and for a punchline, and they get on with it. And of course there's more punchlines when he's like acting like a space ranger, of course, and the others have to like work off that dynamic. They have to bounce off that, and I really like that. And it's like because you mentioned it as well, like the dynamics between the first and the second one, it's like, or the second and the third one, if a character is sidelined in the second one, they're brought back into the third one. And the little narratives that were in the first film, they were kind of, because this film to me feels like Toy Story 1 but just flipped on its head, in the sense that Buzz was chasing after Woody in Toy Story 2, but in Toy Story 1 it was Woody going after Buzz, but this time it was Buzz rescuing Woody, and it felt similar in that respect, that the stories were pretty similar, but it was just like a different adventure.
More or less what I'm seeing here is that like the overall story idea is not that unique, and so I appreciate the bits where they did introduce new ideas, and so like the idea of the new characters and the Al's Toy Barn and everything was good. But you're right, like the central idea and the fact that they call it out doesn't really help. The central idea just being, well, Woody came to get me, now I'm going to go to get him. And it's like, ooh, that would get really, I mean, I'm glad they didn't do that for the third and fourth movie, because that would get really stale very quickly.
Well, even down towards the end with that role reversal where, Buzz Lightyear calling out Woody saying, you are a toy.
Yes, exactly. Yes, same dialogue.
Absolutely.
Exactly back at him, yeah. So.
And I did like that, like the dynamic of Woody trying to battle that, in terms of like he says, oh, what am I doing? And I think finally you've snapped out of it, because of course it's going to be a very emotional situation for him. He's just got caught up in this whirlwind of stuff, like he's this celebrity or whatever. He thinks he's better, or he thinks he's superior, just like Buzz did in Toy Story 1, because Buzz thought he had like actual story to him, but then Woody actually does. So it's an interesting little dynamic there, because Woody actually has something going for him, whereas Buzz didn't. That's why Woody was more resistant to going back. But then eventually he listens to the song or whatever, and he just remembers what Buzz said to him. You got a friend in me, and I think he sees like a kid, or is it meant to be Andy in the program that kind of hugs him?
I don't think it's meant to literally be, but that's meant to be the idea, is that Woody like seeing it invoking Andy in his mind's eye or whatever.
Gotcha. Well, that little moment, I really appreciate how that kind of played out.
Yeah, I guess, but that brings me to another interesting point then, is that were you guys happy and kind of satisfied with how it played off that? Because to me, again, it's done better in the third and fourth movie, where it touches on this really big idea of, well, your owner will eventually grow out of you and grow up, and then what happens to you, you never know, kind of thing. And it just seemed like it was paid very sort of random lip service in this movie before being dealt with better in the sequels. But I'd be curious to know if you guys thought the same, or if it was happy with the way that it was handled.
You see, I agree with you, but only because it was handled better in the third film. Yeah, I think if it on its own, because at the time, of course, when this film came out, there was no Toy Story 3, obviously. No. So I just have to judge this film in the context of this film alone. But yes, in retrospect, having watched Toy Story 3, I also know, I think we're noticing the same things here, but it's just rubbing on us a bit differently, because yes, I did notice it, but yes, it didn't really bother me. It bothered me in the sense that I was like, okay, that's a Toy Story 3 plotline, but it didn't disparage this film.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It's just, for me, I just felt very like, I felt like I should have gotten more of an impact out of, well, yeah, one day I'll be abandoned, but I'm going to enjoy every moment in the meantime. And I was like, ooh, that's a bit kind of, that's to say the least bittersweet, So,
yeah.
What about you, DK? Were you of the same opinion, or did you kind of?
I am of the same opinion. Yeah, it didn't really. I mean, he brought it up. Obviously, didn't kind of go anywhere with it, and it kind of touched upon it in the end, and it kind of brought that feeling back. And you're like, oh,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it's weird how, again, Jessie kind of completely comes around to the idea of another owner just because she can go with them, and it's like, you can go with them and Andy will look after you now as well. And I'm like, isn't the whole point that she like knows that she's going to be abandoned and would be resistant?
You know, says Andy's got a sister. Oh, she's got a sister. Oh, fantastic! And then she just runs at the chance to be abandoned again. So he never kind of plays that theme out.
Exactly, and I will say I wasn't fond of that. I mean, I know, you know, looking back with modern eyes and stuff, that's fair enough. But I didn't love the idea of, and I mentioned this to Will, the idea that the film, and it does it a few times, it really does that thing about there are girls' toys and boys' toys, and I'm like, oh, are we not societally kind of past all this now? You know,
the thing, I'm sure we're talking on the female toys in a minute because there is quite a bit to see on that. But with what you just mentioned about Jessie running the opportunity to be a kid's toy again, I think that was kind of the point, because at that time both Jessie and Woody had accepted that they were going to the museum. So at that and then of course Woody has the change of heart, and then he has to convince her, and they both have similar changes of heart, even though just a minute ago they both again were committed to going to the museum. So I think you had to have her sort of get broken down in the sense that he has to convince her to go with him for the exact same reason as he does. And I don't, it's not,
I'm fine with it
for beat, but it had
I
to be
get
done.
it, and I'm fine with it, but I just think it could have been handled. It seemed like it came out of nowhere, and I don't know how you would have done it, but it would have been nice if there was a bit of an addressing of like, you can be a kid's toy again, and you never know, maybe even after, you know, we may be grown out of, but then you never know, there might be other kids out there, you know, so you can have a life and be played with and not be just behind a shelf or a glass case or whatever. But didn't really take the time to do that. It was just like, hey, Jessie, you want to come be abandoned again? Like DK says, and it's kind of like, really? You're not even the least bit kind of like, I don't know, man. I don't know about opening my heart again. But and as I say, I just really resent the idea that because Jessie is a female cowgirl, it had to be like, oh, Andy's got a sister. And I was like, and? You're still Andy's toy. Just because you're a girl toy. I mean, he's got a peep.
Yeah, I was gonna say, but even in Toy Story 3, the sister still got Boopy, the sister still got the Barbie dolls and whatever. So it's very, what's the word, cliche or stereotypical in that respect.
Pick on that on the behind the scenes, Mike, with regards to Barbie.
I didn't actually know. That's one of the. I don't think I quite had as much as you, but if you wanted to jump in now, then by all means.
It was just basically then in the first one they put Bo Peep in because they couldn't get the rights to Barbie. Mattel wouldn't hand it over.
Oh.
And it wasn't until they saw how much money the first film made for this one that they went, yeah, okay, we'll grant you the license.
I do remember reading that now, when I remember that they didn't want it because they were worried they might tarnish the brand, but then being that Mattel other things were featured, and then they saw like a massive uptick in like Mr. Potato Head sales and stuff. So they allowed Barbie to be in, and then naturally life imitating art, they brought out for the first time a tour guide Barbie based on the one in the movie, and it sold like hotcakes, obviously. So, which didn't previously exist. It was like a gag for the movie, and now you can buy it. So, related to that, since we're on it, though, I forgot to also mention in the behind the scenes that there's a really cool moment when the tour guide Barbie comes to the Buzz Lightyear aisle and says, back in 1995, short-sighted toy retailers didn't order enough stock to meet demand. And that's genuinely true. Like, there weren't enough Buzz Lightyear toys after the first movie for the amount of people that wanted to buy them. So it's very meta, I guess.
Did you get yours, Mike?
I don't. I've never had a Buzz Lightyear toy, actually. My little brother did briefly, but it was one of the second-hand bought from some guy at the market, so it kind of had sun damage, and it wasn't the best looking thing, unfortunately. But no, I've never had a Buzz Lightyear or a Woody, but I do have a little miniature Wall-E.
Tiny victories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's fair enough. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so as I was discussing like the idea of like the male and female toys and the slight kind of, I guess, controversy, or just the way that it doesn't sit well with me, that brings me to the way that they deal with the Prospector, in that like the ultimate horrible nightmarish fate is that he goes to a girl, and it's like, oh, she's an artist, she's going to put makeup on you and stuff, and I'm like, I don't get this scene. What are we supposed to take from this? Do you know what I mean?
But you've got to bear in mind that, you know, obviously times have changed since then. Otherwise, they would have kept that outtake in at the end. Attitudes were very, very different.
Yeah, it's just.
I do think, based on what we knew of the Prospector, it did feel kind of his antithesis in terms of he didn't want to be played with. He didn't even. He didn't want to be. He wanted to be a museum piece. He wanted to be
minted
true to himself. So the fact that he's been played with is bad enough, and that was hell for him. So when he found out that she was an artist as well, that was the end for him.
But that adds another layer to his character. He's kind of a hypocrite as well because, he wants to remain mint in box, but he's popping in and out of his box regardless.
Yeah, exactly. Hence the jokey kind of "you're out of your box" gag, which
I
did
get the museum, though. That was the final resort to get to the museum, I suppose.
Well, yeah, you say that, but he was the one that pressed the remote, so as DK says, he must have been popping in and out at will. So
true.
But yeah, since I'm on the subject of that, in case I forget, by the way, apropos of nothing, but in terms of when we were discussing, like, the animation's really good in this film before we started recording, Will. One of the things I did notice that I was really impressed with is the reflections on, like, the cellophane part of the Prospector's box, because that must have been a nightmare to get looking, like, realistic.
Yeah.
And
like when he into it as well, when he was like, "What do you know?" And then I was like, "Oh, that really comes out really well."
Yeah, it's so complicated, and it so could have been something they would just cheat or not care about and just make it like transparent. But the way it interacted with the lighting and everything, I thought was just breathtaking. And since I haven't mentioned it on air, I will say yes, I love the fact that when it's animating humans, they just look so virtually live action, almost, with the way they have every pore and hair. And the scene that shows you that for me is when Woody's climbing over Al.
I was just thinking that, yeah.
Yeah, after he's dropped all the kind of cheese puffs off of the floor. And it's so weird because, as I mentioned to you again, Will, although the humans and everything are animated really good, there's a few scenes of like the background, like the streets and the buildings and stuff, which just look really basic, like Mega Drive graphics 2D. And it's like...
Yeah, I noticed that this time. I'd never noticed it before.
Yeah.
I don't think I had like the airport scene towards the end. After that whole climax scene, I noticed it with the houses towards the end when they transitioned from the airport to the housing again. I was like, oh, that doesn't look so good. But then I did mention it to you, Mike, that the original transition where Woody was initially stolen from the yard sale, and then I think they find out that he lives in a block of flats or whatever, and then we transition out of the window and we see the flats out in the distance, and then we transition into the flat. Like, that looks superb. And that was the building. So
it seems like if it's a hero building, like Al's Toy Barn or where they live and stuff, a hero area is animated really well, but like they just didn't. And I can't blame them for it. I mean, if it's a background thing,
time.
You're doing it in 9 months, it saves time. And for me, it wasn't even the same scene. It was when, as I mentioned, they kind of go out of the toy barn and they're trying to get the automatic door working. And you just look across the street and it's kind of like, ooh, those buildings look a bit basic. But fair enough. What was it that brought it to your attention this time around, DK? Then was it just a random part of the movie, or
it was towards the start. I thought some of the animation towards the start. I don't know if you mentioned it, Buster. I wasn't entirely sold on the animation.
No, yeah.
But some of the backgrounds in that section prior to Woody being kidnapped, as it were, some of the backgrounds looked a little rushed.
Yeah, well, as I say, which might be, part of a symptom of the fact that it was done in 9 months for whatever reason that might be. So, but having said that, like you said, it's worth pointing out a lot of the animation that is flawless, and that will be an interesting sort of segue into the next thing I have written on my notes that I'll finally get to, which is, ironically, the very start of the movie, which we haven't even talked about yet. I just wanted to say that I really love. I know it's kind of like it's hypocritical of me because it calls back to the original movie, but I love the subversion of the fact that the first movie opens with it's Woody's reality, and it's Andy playing with it, so it's not real, but it's Woody's version of reality. And then this one opens with Buzz's version, which, as it turns out, is a video game in kind of the same way as the other one was Andy's imagination. So I love that they kind of flipped that for the other character, and I just really love the fact that it's gorgeously animated and it's really well done, and it's a cool little action sequence within itself. So did you guys think
it was a really great start?
Yeah, definitely.
I think it's the best out of all 4 movie starts, because all 4 movies have like a opening 5-10 minute sequence, and I think the Toy Story 2 is the one that
I'm going to say even considering 3, I love 3.
I love 3 as well. I brought it up earlier, but Toy Story 2 is always the one that I remember so vividly.
I just mean the opening sequence, for whatever reason, I really liked the opening sequence of 3, which is weird because it's basically a reprise of the opening from 1 with better effects, I guess, and more use of like Buzz Lightyear and the other toys. But yeah, for whatever reason, that one I think is my favorite. But yeah, this is very close and just a really good scene. I'm a sucker for space sci-fi type stuff and everything, and Even appreciated the gag of like when they go to Zurg's source of power and it's like a little D battery. just
I like how when he puts his hand through it, it's got the lightsaber sound effect.
Oh, I noticed that. Yeah, there was a couple of moments of that. There's a Star Wars blaster sound effect when he gets shot at. There's the Darth Vader breathing sound effect when he kind of first takes off his helmet, and then, as you said, there's the lightsaber sound effect when he puts his hand through it. And yeah, you can. They are very definitely sampled from actual Star Wars. It's quite deliberate. So
yeah.
Which is good. I mean, the sound design in general, I think, on these movies is brilliant because it is those top guys, isn't it? So you can't really fault it. Yeah. Excuse me. I did, but mind you, I did think it was a bit shocking, especially for a kids' movie, and because I always relate these to like being appropriate for really young kids. I did find it shocking that Buzz Lightyear in the intro is just shot and immediately like obliterated in half, and then it reveals it's a video game, and I'm like, phew, because that was brutal.
To be fair, that was in the scene where I felt that, the scene where Andy is the dream sequence where Woody's on the top of the shelf, but he kind of gets dropped into the cards, and then he goes into the bin, and then he's pulled into the bin, and I think that could traumatize a child.
I don't find that traumatizing. I just find it trippy and really well animated.
So, I
think it's what would scare a child though.
It would traumatize a small child. If I'd have seen that at the cinema when I was really young, I'd have been crying.
I was scared of that as a child. So not only did I skip the Jessie montage scene, I also skipped that bit because I just didn't like it. In the respect that I was quite traumatized by it.
You love this movie that you've actually only seen about like 2/3 of because you just skipped it.
I skipped about 3 minutes of it. Leave me alone.
Fair enough. No, I thought that scene was really well animated, and I loved how kind of trippy it was. It was reminiscent of like Alice in Wonderland and older Disney type stuff, but. Absolutely, I do think there's nothing in this movie anywhere near as traumatizing as the stuff in the first movie, which is my big criticism of that film, is that Sid and the kind of mutilated toys and things are a little bit of a step too far for me in that first one. The weird sort of combination.
I just didn't like Sid in general, no.
Yeah. For me, that was a step too far, but yeah. In this one, I get it, but I don't think it was as bad, so it's a lot more kind of family-friendly for me in that way. Other than that brutal kind of, Buzz is dead, but it's only a game, so it's
and then in Toy Story 3 they're all burnt alive.
Yeah. Exactly. The other thing I want to touch on is that I really love there's a lot of kind of juxtaposition of the difference between like, and it is a cliche and it is generalization, but like the difference between kids and adults as toy collectors. So kids have them to play with and adults are like, we are the collectors, the nerdy ones, the stereotypically, which I should have issue with,
display only.
But to me, that really reminded me of another of my favorite movies, the Lego Movie, which seems to be giving the message of like, adults, toys are to be played with, not like placed behind a glass case and never touched or whatever. Which I hadn't really picked up on before until I was watching it this time, and I was like, that kind of feeds into the he's for display only kind of thing. So did you guys get that impression, or am I just reading too much into it?
No, I definitely got that. So I was secretly, trying to convince myself that I'm not the adult in this scenario.
Well, I'm definitely
surrounded by glass cabinets.
Well, I've got spaceships and things behind glass cabinets like that are models, but I also have, Power Ranger Lightning collection figures and stuff that are out of the box and guarding my shelves. So I'm going to claim I'm somewhere in between. Though I can't say I've actually pulled them out and started playing with them or anything. So I'm
just going to say it's because I can't be asked to dust.
You're not wrong. You are not wrong. So
much into it. I just found the scene where he's repairing him really satisfying, and I think that is ultimately the point. But it's such a satisfying scene, getting him, watching him get pampered up.
Definitely, yeah.
That's one of my favorite scenes, like historically and right now. Like there's so many scenes that kind of stuck in the memory, and I thought, okay, that still really holds up. I still love this scene, and that's alongside the opening sequence, the oddly satisfying repair scene and the final climactic jump on the aeroplane onto the horse. Those are the three scenes that I kind of remember, and it's like the start, the middle, and the end. I just love those three.
I'm really glad they didn't give Bullseye a voice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, probably, yeah. That's weird when you think about it, because like Slinky Dog and Rex and everything have a voice. So, but yeah.
I do think like Slinky in particular was quite wasted in this film. Like, yes, he has some talking points, but like I was like, what is the point of Slinky being here? Because like he's not doing much. But the one moment I like, again, it's a small touch, but where the voice actor actually gets to bark, You know, when the ventilation shaft and he gets the bark. I thought, okay, so they're actually feeding into the animal that he's playing, which I quite appreciated. But other than that, I thought the comic relief especially was Rex, and all we needed really was Buzz, Ham, and Rex, not Slinky.
Well,
I love Slinky to death, but I don't think he was needed.
You could argue that about any of the movies as the cast grows and they kind of try to force more and more of these things in. I mean, in Toy Story 4, they have like the guys they introduced in 3, like Mr. Pricklepants and whatever. And it's like they paid Timothy Dalton to literally say, I think, 3 words in that movie just to have him in it. I was like, oh, you don't need to do it. But yeah, it's weird. But having said that, I did appreciate the little joke about, are you all caught up? No. Who's behind? Mine. And it's like his back part comes.
That was like,
oh, yeah.
And then in the gag reel at the end, it's like, oh, great acting, bum.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
From that scene.
Speaking of gags as well, I have to shout it out. I know it's really cheesy and it's so obvious, but I love the gag of like, I can't believe I have to drive all the way to work and it's straight across the road.
Yeah.
Most basic childish gag, but it's still funny.
What's up?
This is an interesting talking point that I had. Is just they introduced like Woody's Roundup here as being where Woody comes from, rather than him just being a random toy. And I was like, is this the movie trying to comment on the fact that everything has to be an IP? Rather than it couldn't just be like a random, cowboy toy that was made, or it has to come from a TV show or a film or real life or whatever. Again, am I reading too much into that?
The thing
I think you might be with that one, but they did need a plot.
Go for it, DK.
No, that were it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just always confused if it is actually Woody who's the cowboy toy, or if there's several Woodies out there.
Oh, there's going to be others, I presume. It's just probably rare to find because the implication is that, it's a cancelled old black and white show, so it's probably quite rare to find there's things like that in.
Because Woody can't remember it, but the other guys are so insistent that it's him, and it literally is him, and they can kind of comprehend that could be other Woodies out there. So I'm always confused about it's kind of mixed messaging there.
I'm just going on the fact that when he finds him in the yard sale at the start, he knows that he needs that stitch polyvinyl hat. So obviously there's some kind of guides out there.
Yeah, specific to that. Like there might be knockoffs, but that's a very specific. Like he has to have all the exact clothes and the little hat and everything. But having said that, I mean, every Buzz Lightyear thinks they're the main heroic Buzz Lightyear.
Yeah.
I think the only difference is that Buzz at this point is mass produced.
Yeah. So yeah.
So if it is of Woody, it opens to another kind of judges, like kind of worm, should I say? It's like, did Woody just forget, or has he had his mind wiped, or it was a bad experience, so he kind of put it to the back of his brain? It's like, how did he forget?
I think it's just one of those things where, to me, I read it as, this is getting way too in depth, but I read it as like these toys were produced to tie in with the TV show, but they aren't the same puppets that were used in the TV show, if you know what I mean. So, like, he only ever would have known he was manufactured and then sold as a toy to a kid, and maybe Andy's his first owner or whatever. And he doesn't know that he's based on this, like, puppet from a TV show in much the same way.
He wouldn't have had that support group that Buzz did when Buzz turned up in Andy's room.
Exactly, yeah. So, I was just going to say that I really liked, again, in terms of, like, the way that writing ties everything in. Because I don't think that was intentional in the first movie, but the way that it links, like, well, Sputnik caused all the Western toys to be replaced with space toys in much the same way that, Star Wars signaled the end of Western movies and the start of sci-fi, I guess, cinema, in a way you could argue. And then, the next stage was probably superhero cinema, but that's a different issue. But I also did think it was nice to have the through line of like Rex wanting to defeat Zurg, which could and maybe should have been annoying, but because it was a through line and it did become important at several times, I was like, this is actually quite clever. Plus, Wallace Shawn as Rex is just brilliant anyway.
Yeah. I did love the scenes where he's reading the guide.
Yeah, definitely. That's how they get you. They make you buy his guide. But, yeah. Awesome.
I did like the writing for Al. I'm not sure if you guys have ever known any kind of Al characters in real life.
No.
Kind of, but never quite extreme, yeah.
I used to work in a comic store.
I see what you mean.
Yes. And he has that kind of attitude that when he's talking to people that he feels are below him, he's really, dismissive. But the moment there's money involved, or the moment, he can get a rung on the ladder, he's ass kissing all the way.
Yeah, I know what you mean actually now. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely people like that. But as you say, I think that's he kind of has to be the bad guy in the movie, but at the same time, that's the point. Is his attitude towards toys is definitely pointed out as being wrong. Like they're not to be admired and not played with. So.
But he's like the antagonist, but he's also there for like comic relief because whenever he speaks really quickly. He's like the center of attention. When he barges the guy who did just repainted Woody and fixed him and whatever, it's like a serious moment. And then, oh no, I was back, the center of attention again, and he's just like really charismatic. And I just love the character from the voice acting to the animation of him.
He's a lot like a lot of the Wayne Knight characters in that way, in that he's completely irredeemable, but you kind of find it amusing because he's so bad at being bad, and yet he's so cliche. He's cheap. He doesn't want to pay the price of shipping, even though he's probably got how many extra zeros can we chuck on, but he still won't pay for the 1 day delivery. So it's this dude is just really not very nice, and he's rude to the people at the airport, and it's it's such a broad cliche of this is a bad dude. But you kind of have to laugh at him and mock him, I guess. So I have to mention this next line because there's a couple of lines I want to talk about. And DK, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that, yes, Buzz does have the line, "Has your mind been melded?" Which, of course, is a reference to Star Trek.
Yeah.
We're going to try and get Star Trek in as much as we can in the podcast.
And doesn't he give the Vulcan salute later on in the movie too?
I didn't spot that, but I very much could believe you. So,
yeah.
What was I going to say? In terms of other lines that I just liked, again, it's going to surprise nobody, but I love the how do we get through? Use your head. I don't want to use my head. I just use it as a battering ram.
Yeah. I love the whole sequences in the ventilation shafts and whatever. It's when Buzz is really playing up to his Lightyear kind of stature, and he says, "Well, Sloyd pig." That's my favorite line from. It's because Ham says, "Oh, Buzz, where'd you get that bell?" And he says, "Well, Sloyd pig, it's actually antique." And I just love how he said Sloyd pig. That's why it's my name on Roostream. And it's oh, giant lizard, and I just absolutely loved it. I love that dynamic. But yeah, there's some
related to that. I also found it funny when they mentioned how are we going to get into the block of flats? And it's we could say we're a pizza. No, we're a meal. We're a what is it? A burger with a hot dog. What about me? You can be the toy that comes with the meal.
Yeah,
that was pretty fun. And what was I going to say? Let's see.
When Rex drops his book and it goes under the shelf and he says, "Oh no, my source of power." I love that bit.
In terms of these aren't really funny, but they're lines that gave me feels, which is at the very end when it calls back "What's a cowboy without his hat" was really good. And once they've kind of saved the day and everything, and she actually says, "Well, that was definitely Woody's finest hour," which was the kind of episode that never got made because it was cancelled. And on the subject of jokes that will hopefully go over kids' heads, but that are there for adults. Yes, again, it's cheesy, but I still laughed at Buzz's wings are an erection joke at the very end.
Yeah.
Ding. Oh, and I have to shout out as well, because we were just talking about Jurassic World last week, the other blatant Jurassic Park reference when Rex is chasing the Barbie car. And they're
I love that.
Yeah, so did I.
Such a cool reference. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot else to say until we get into the next section. Section I'm on now is music, which I have to mention. Yes, there's the Close Encounters reference that I also love when Buzz is jumping over the...
Yeah.
It goes do 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 do, which is great.
I thought it was in 2001.
No, it's Close Encounters theme, isn't it? That's the whole point. It's the notes that they play to.
Anyway, bah, bah, bah,
oh, is it? Oh, maybe I'm wrong.
Give me that nerd card. It's revoked.
I apologize. Sorry. Well, there you go. That's me told. But unlike you guys, I really loved, although it always brings a tear to my eye, I really loved When Somebody Loved Me. I think it's a really, really good song. And it's very impactful. And yes, it is nice to hear You've Got a Friend in Me, even if it is diegetic within the actual movie this time. It's not outside of the plot. So it's actually Wheezy singing it and stuff, And obviously it's on Woody's Roundup, so that's good.
Yeah, if we can actually talk about the actual soundtrack, I know the actual songs used outside is the soundtrack as well, but the actual created songs for this, I really liked the really intense dun, 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 soundtrack that plays when they're in the cones and they're going across the roads, and it's like
Yeah, that was my
really
next thing I was
really
gonna talk
intense. And I think not only is it a great scene, even though it does take creative liberty, like every single film that does like those tense little moments, is it gonna hit them or not? It's like Indiana Jones. It's like when that the door is going down, the door kind of goes up a bit further after each cut, because naturally he wouldn't get through the door in time. Like in Star Wars, when they're being crushed to death, the walls get further and further apart with every cut, because you think, oh, how are they going to get out of this? We got to see this character get from there to there. And it's like when Mr. Potato Head's foot gets stuck, like the bowl.
Oh, that's so tense.
Yeah, like it goes back a bit in terms of when it falls off the cage or whatever, when it falls off the truck, it's like really, really close. And then we have like this 15-second sequence where it just keeps going back and back and back.
Yeah.
And the perspectives change, because naturally he wouldn't, get out in time if it was like the same distance as the first shot we saw.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's because of that, it's just really tense. He's going to survive, but the music just complements that massively.
It's pretty tense, but I wanted to talk about that scene because it's one of the brief scenes that I've talked about here, which is to say, I love that it literally starts off with the good joke of like, we have to cross this road, and Rex just goes, oh, well, we tried, and just turns around and goes back. And, the genius of like using the traffic cones to cross as if it's some kind of like great idea. And yet, like, even though it's all off screen, the fact that they're clearly causing like absolute carnage, and just like the thing that really tickled me, that made me laugh, is like the hubcap of a wheel just rolling into frame. It's just like massive crash off screen. I was like, see, I like that kind of humor. So yeah, I really thought that scene was good fun, good funny humor. So yeah,
absolutely.
And that was literally the end of my notes until we get to favorite character moment in line. So,
but I must say, before we do go on, I think the scene where Woody's jumping across, what is it, like a luggage carrier vehicle?
It's the conveyor belt thing that they use on the airport for the luggage.
Yeah, like the music that was playing when Woody was jumping over trying to save Jessie. Like, I love that piece of music. And the very final scene where they're on the plane and they are about to jump, I really love the music that was played out in there. And then it kind of goes quiet, and then the plane comes in over them and it gets really loud, but not with music, but with sound effects of the plane. I love how that kind of built up, and then the whoosh, and then then that whoosh transitioned into the next scene, and I thought that was fabulous. So yeah, if we're talking about the music, that's all I gotta say about it. Fantastic.
Kind of semi-related to that, there's a few great moments of like transitions as well. So there's the other one that sticks in my mind is when Buzz has like the hero shot of like the Earth or the Federation symbol or something behind him that then cuts to like the TV. On the other scene, and I was like, I loved it. Again, they could have just cut straight to the scene, but little transitions like that, little directorial touches, I always appreciate. So
it reminds you that it's an American film and an American production.
Well, I don't think it was necessarily about being American.
It was on the nose. It was on the nose, that bit, but yeah.
It wasn't an American flag, was it? I thought it was just like the Space Ranger Foundation.
In the US version, it is an American flag.
The BBC iPlayer one was definitely American flag.
Okay, fair enough.
They used the American version for the BBC.
Apparently so, yeah.
So I remember it being like a globe and fireworks prior to me watching
that's
it.
The one that I had on the Blu-ray.
I think that's what I remembered. I think that's the one they show on BBC, just like on the program. But the iPlayer version had the American flag and it had the American soundtrack going, like the American national anthem.
Yeah, that's the one I saw.
That's definitely not the one that's on the Blu-ray, for what it's worth. But yeah, I definitely just had the globe.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, Pixar do that though, don't they? And other DreamWorks movies and stuff do that. They have like local celebrities, depending on where you are, doing voices and stuff. Any other notes, or DK? Was there anything like behind the scenes that I may have forgotten from the intro bit? Or
I think from what we were talking about the other day, you've probably covered anything. Have you the Sweet Mother of Abraham Lincoln? You got that?
No.
When Jessie first meets Woody, she exclaims, "Sweet Mother of Abraham Lincoln." It's actually a reference to Tom Hanks' ancestry, as he's a blood relative of the president on his mother's side.
Oh, of course, I know that fact. Yeah.
Yeah, Tom Hanks was great in this as well. I have to say that because it's one of Will's favorite actors. So I think he's excellent in this.
Dylan and Tom Hanks do an absolute service and a credit to this franchise. I love them to bits.
Yeah.
The only scene that I kind of want to point out before we do wrap things up or whatever was that when they're trying to escape from the car, and then Mr. Potato Head gets splung into 1,000 different pieces. I love that bit where like Buzz falls back and then he ejects the window or something, and then Mr. Potato Head's on the window and then he flings back and then he just bursts, and that was hilarious.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just another
since you're talking about that scene, this very nearly made my favorite line and just missed out. And again, I don't know why I find it so amusing, but I love it in that scene when they're all like focusing on driving, and then Ham's just in the back seat reading the manual, just going, "Well, there's no way he's getting this kind of mileage." Yeah. I don't know why that's funny, but it's like toys in real world circumstances dealing with human problems is always like, amusing to me. So, yeah. Anyway, What we'll do then, we'll give our favorite character moment and line. Then I'll cut to the audience response, and then we'll conclude with our conclusions and scores, so the audience stick around. So we will begin with favorite character moment and line. So what's your favorite character? And we'll start with you, Will, since you're the guest, and then DK, then myself. So who's your favorite character in the movie and maybe why?
My favorite character would probably be Buzz, just because I really like the character arcs that he goes on in the first and second film. And I just, even though I prefer Tom Hanks, of course, as an actor, I just gravitate towards Buzz more, I think. And that would probably be my favorite character.
What about you, DK?
Okay, I was going to actually say Wheezy for the longest time, but it's got to have to be Woody.
Okay, fair enough. Woody and Wheezy the Penguin a close second then.
Yeah.
Any reason why it's Woody, or just the fact that it's basically his like main plot, that Woody's Roundup and
like Will, I think Tom Hanks is just a fantastic actor, and everybody loves the double act of Woody and Buzz, but for me, the heart of the franchise is just Woody.
Absolutely.
Right, fair enough. Okay. My favorite character, which will upset you, was Jessie, unfortunately. You guys. I will say Rex was very close because he amuses me in like all of the bits and steals most of the scenes, but it was Jessie because the impact, the emotion, and frankly embodying the themes that the movie is trying to come to put across, I think I got from that. And that, and it's just a really great performance. So yeah. So then Will, back to you. What's your favorite moment or scene in the movie?
Oh man, this is difficult because there's so many. Okay, I know what scene. I won't mention the scene that I've already touched upon because I want to keep things fresh. It's probably when Woody's just like, "Hey, it's you guys," and then Buzz just pounces on him and he says, "Watch yourself." Like there was literally no breathing room there at all when they're coming to save Woody, and then they burst through the thing, and then it was just really funny, and I rewound that about 3 times because it just worked perfectly. Hey, you guys, watch yourself! Pow! I loved it.
Fair enough. What about you, DK? There's only one choice for me, and it hurts, but everybody knows it as this film, and it's Jessie's flashback scene. It's very painful, but I don't think you can beat it.
Fair enough. I definitely can see where you're coming from with that. It is the most impactful scene. My favorite scene on the complete polar opposite of that it's the stuff we were talking about. It's the crossing the road scene, just because it's base level humor that appeals to me. But I will say it feels like I should have picked all of the sci-fi stuff. So yes, just to clarify, I do love the opening scenes in the Buzz video game, and I do love the Star Wars reference with Zurg and everything. But it's just not as funny for me as that road crossing scene and the absolute carnage happening off screen as they think they're doing a great job, just hiding under traffic cones and stuff. So yeah, that was what I went for. And so finally then for this section, Will, what is your favorite quote or line from the movie?
Well slotted pig.
You pick the weirdest things all the time. But okay,
it's pretty weird dialogue. It's funny.
Fair enough. And what about you, DK?
Well, it's going back to what we were on about earlier with that bittersweet thing, but I do love the last conversation between Woody and Buzz in the film. And I like that, it'll be fun while it lasts. Besides, when it all ends, I'll have old Buzz Lightyear to keep me company for infinity and beyond.
Yeah, the sad thing about that line is that obviously they hadn't reckoned with Toy Story 4 because not gonna have him around. But never mind.
Go peeps on the scene. See you, Buzz.
Yeah, exactly. I'll still have Buzz Lightyear. Oh no, never mind. Here, have a fork. Yeah. My favorite line is, I don't know the exact speech because I didn't write it down, but it's basically when Jessie and Woody are discussing like having an owner or whatever, and I think it's Woody says the words for her and says something like, "Even though you're not moving, it really feels like you're alive when they're playing with you and stuff." So I appreciated that, and that was the impactful line that I would say, even though you might have expected me to go for a gag. And like I said, I very nearly did go with, I seriously doubt he's getting this kind of mileage. So, yeah, that's fair enough.
I have to ask before you get on the conclusion, did anybody else, with regards to how we treat toys, did anybody else feel guilty how they treated the toys as kids?
Not really.
I came away from this feeling like a bastard.
I can't say I did. I still don't really think about it even when I watch these movies because I'm like, well, you know.
Don't get me wrong, I was no Sid, but you know, the amount of toys that I've sold in my life, and I just think, oh God, I abandoned them.
This is going to come across as really sad that I didn't really have toys growing up. I just had my little cars, and I had like a car mat, and that was my source of entertainment. And to be fair, I also had a PlayStation 2, so that was taking my attention as a 5-year-old.
So your version of Toy Story would be a PS2 looking all forlorn as the PS3 gets released. The PS2's like, he's going to replace me.
Pretty much.
Fair enough. Oh, well, if that's all for that bit, then I'll move on to the next section, which is the audience interaction section. As usual, I put out onto social media, some thoughts about this movie. We didn't get a lot of responses, but I've discussed this with DK. I did actually join a Discord sort of movie server where I put the question to them, and there's a good long thread that got talking about Toy Story 2 of good responses. But before I get to that, though, I will deal with the stuff that I put on kind of Twitter, because I did put some polls out as we've started doing more this series. The first one was, what would you rate Toy Story 2 out of 4 stars? There was only 12 votes. Nobody said 1 star poor or 2 stars below average. 25% said 3 stars good, and a whopping 75% said 4 stars excellent. So pretty ringing endorsement, I would say. I asked which is the best Toy Story movie out of obviously the 4. With 7%, last place went to Toy Story 4. Third place went to Toy Story 2 with 27%, and joint first with 33% each was Toy Story and Toy Story 3. So very intriguing. I also asked who is the best Toy Story character, as Will was mentioning earlier, and the 4 options were Woody, Buzz Lightyear, Jessie, or other, and you could comment if you wanted. Jessie came in last with 8%. Buzz Lightyear and other both came in with 25% in joint second, and Woody was the far and away winner with 42%. So, yeah. On the topic of that, though, I did say, you could have commented if you wanted to, and I did get some comments to that. Who's your favorite character? Which were all the same answer. So Mark Lilly at Mark J. Lilly said Rex, or maybe Mrs. Potato Head. I pecked your angry eyes. Lol. At Camos Mills just says Rex and has the little emoji of a dinosaur and a GIF. And our friend at Crazy Pilf, that's Phil from the We Pay For Your Floor podcast, says the only right answer here is Rex, although I may be biased due to him being 1, green, the best color, 2, a dinosaur, and 3, very relatable. And I pointed out it also helps that he's voiced by Wallace Shawn from one of his favorite movies, The Princess Bride. So there you go. I did ask if anybody wanted to rank the Toy Story movies, because just for argument's sake, I was able to do that for my own personal reasons. And I went with the ranking of best to worst, or favorite to least favorite. Toy Story 3, Toy Story 2, then Toy Story 4. DK declined to comment because he said he couldn't really bring himself to rank them. And the only other comment was at Camos Mills again, who just says, I like them all, but I'm going to have to go with the first. So, yeah, that's fair enough. I'm sorry, at Camos Mills actually did rank them. He said, number 1, Toy Story. Number 2, Toy Story 3. Number 3, Toy Story 4. And last place in 4, Toy Story 2. Don't tell Will that. The last bit of information at Mark J. Lilly said, I honestly think that the opening sequence to Toy Story 2 is the best movie opening ever. It's outstanding. So a lot of praise for that Buzz Lightyear video gamey sequence. I also, because I wasn't getting a lot of responses, asked my little brother for his opinion because I just happened to be messaging him. So, why not? So that's at Sam Milliken. He says, I can't remember it too well. I like it from what I can remember. I can mainly only remember Jessie's introduction and Buzz's storyline. Okay. And I asked, what did you think of Toy Story 2? And this is the Discord thread. Wildfire said, it's the first DVD my family bought. It might also be the best Pixar movie, or is that take too hot? Orange says, not the first, but I had it on video, and it's a lukewarm take. Wildfire then responded, either Toy Story 2 or The Incredibles. Jaden says, the nightmare scene with Woody in the Black Void used to scare the shit out of me as a kid. Wildfire then simply posted a link to the song When She Loved Me from Toy Story 2 and said, never realized how sad this was until I was an adult. Mari responded, the life of a toy is pretty rough. And Wildfire, stating the obvious, said, it's a metaphor. So, yeah, okay. Cake Monster said, Toy Story 2 is a great movie. Might be my favorite Toy Story film. Wumbo said, same, love the creepy man kidnapping toys. Queen of Cringe says, I'm scared of part 2. To which Wumbo asked why, and they responded, the airport part is scary. Then Highlander said, Toy Story 3 is scarier. Junkyard Scene. Thinking About a Revolution said, Toy Story 3 is the best one. Morbius says, wrong take, 2 is the best one. And then Thinking About a Revolution said, 2's the worst one. 1 and 2 are bad. I know it's wrong. It's just what I believe. Wildfire then called for him to be banned. I know, right? Half robot, half living vampire said 4 is the best one. Morbius chimed back in with, I genuinely do not remember 4. Highlander came back with 4 was fine. I think I like 2 the best because of the video game being really good. Then Thinking About a Revolution said, the game is not the movie. And half robot, half living vampire said, 3 actually had a good game, which was the end of the conversation. But I will say we had a little bit of information from the Silver Screen Podcast Twitter, which, as we alluded to earlier, it was our friend Jamie, or Mario Bowser 494, who said, Toy Story 2 is my favorite animated movie and one of my favorite movies, period. Everything about it is just perfect. Woody's arc is more interesting than in the first movie. There's a lot of more mature themes. Buzz's side plot is a ton of fun, especially the traffic cone scene. And the fact that the movie is as good as it is, despite most of it being animated in 9 months, is incredible. So
absolutely,
that will conclude all of the audience responses, thankfully, to that. And
big up, Jamie.
Big up indeed, Jamie. Thanks for contributing. So with that out of the way, we are going to jump into our conclusions and scores. And again, since you're the guest, we'll start with you. And did you want to give your conclusion and your score out of 5 stars?
Oh, bloody hell. You know what I'm like with conclusions, Mike.
It's going to be like solid, mate. Yeah.
Oh, it's been so long since I actually had a decent conclusion. Right. Toy Story 2, very good. Very good, I suppose. Very good. It's went down slightly in my estimations. I do prefer Toy Story 1 now, but I still appreciate Toy Story 2, especially with the nostalgia reasons. A lot of the scenes, well, pretty much all the scenes, every single scene actually holds up really well. And there's some bits I naturally don't like. There's some little nitpicks I have that kind of bring the film down a bit. But otherwise, it's still really strong, and I'd give it. We're doing for out of 5, yeah?
Yeah.
4 stars out of 5.
Okay, fair enough. So DK, we'll jump to you next. Did you want to give your conclusion and score?
Okay, bit long, but so bear with me. I'm a Disney nerd, and I was a huge fan of the original 1995 Toy Story. So when this was announced, I was reluctant to even consider the possibility that it could be any good. You have to remember, this was in the days when Disney sequels were primarily straight-to-video affairs, and any part 2s were usually cheaper, less quality imitations used to cash in on nostalgia. However, Pixar were the first to successfully buck that trend with this movie. I'm so glad I relented and saw it in the cinema when it was released. It was funny, heartwarming, and occasionally heartbreaking. I've watched it occasionally since it came to home video, and it's been a while since my last viewing, so I was afraid my memories of it would outshine the reality. But I'm so glad to say that I was concerned for nothing. And, slight aged animation issues aside, it's still just as charming, as entertaining as the first time I saw it. The animation holds up well, direction is good, with some beautifully, especially for an animation, shot scenes. There are also some very nice homages to other movies, and the entire thing is chock full of Easter eggs for sharp-eyed viewers. Every voice artist involved injects the characters with a personality and a richness that you feel for these toys, and in some cases feel guilty for the way you may have treated your own. Mine, that's probably just me. The humour is not forced unless you squint at the outtake scenes, and these movies were a pioneer for adding jokes for adults and children alike. I can't really complain about a single thing on this movie or any of these movies, because although we each have our favourite in the franchise, all of the Toy Story films, even the shorts, have always been a masterclass in well thought out, planned, and executed quality. When an animated movie transcends its genre and can be respected as pieces of cinema, you know there's something special. And this movie, like the others, are special. And I actually gave it 5 out of 5.
So you're going 5 out of 5 for it then.
I'm going to give 5 out of 5 here.
Awesome, fair enough. My conclusion's kind of longish. I just said Pixar knows how to make great movies and great sequels, and this was the first proof. Brace yourself, though, because it feels to me like the weakest part of the initial trilogy. It relies a bit too heavily on referencing the first movie to truly stand alone, and though it comes close, it lacks the emotional punch that the third movie will take its themes to. That said, it's still a bloody good movie. It looks gorgeous, the voice performances and animation are outstanding, and it's frequently very cleverly plotted and still has room for some jokes for all ages. Maybe it's the lack of as much of a personal connection, but it really just doesn't have the impact and magic of the first and third movies to me. Although while it lacks the nostalgia factor, it's far more emotionally affecting than the first movie, at least, and I still get more than a little misty-eyed at Jessie's song. Pixar and Toy Story have such high standards that even with my criticisms, my score is one that most animated family films can only dream of. Not exactly to infinity and beyond, but certainly reaching for the sky. And I also went 4 out of 5. So, yeah. The overall podcast score, then, the average of 4, 4, and 5, means that the final score for this film is 4.3333 recurring. So we'll call it 4.33 out of 5, which is a pretty high score for Toy Story 2. And very well done, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for wrestling with your internet issues, DK, to be able to join us. And thank you, Will, for coming back on and for selecting the movie that we were going to review today.
No worries. I'm glad you guys had. Did you guys have fun? I had fun.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate rewatching
here in the end.
Yeah. I'm glad.
Awesome. So Will, did you want to give any quick shout outs as you're the guest again to the other places people can find you?
Shout out to the Silver Screen podcast. Please subscribe to them. They're very good. I don't know who they are personally, but yeah.
Yes, you do.
But yeah, I'm very much the recurring guest here now. So if you like me, just stick around because I'm probably on this podcast more than my own. So yeah, literally, the last episode that we did that I was on was like 3 months ago. So and since then I've been on about four or five of your episodes.
I feel bad because we stole you for the Top Gun review, and then your co-host decided to do one on your channel without you. So
he wanted to do one with me, and I was like, I can't because I literally just did one on last weekend. That happened. So check that out if you want. The Big Screen podcast. It might get revived. I've been trying to edit the Morbius review for ages, but then I absolutely hate that review, so it's never seen the light of day. Subscribe to my Twitter page. Yeah, subscribe to my Twitter page. There'll be a link in the description. But otherwise, just check out Michael and DK. I'll pass it.
And do check out the Who Game Show's YouTube channel because there's going to be some content going up there very soon.
Yeah, you guys are on that.
Indeed, we are. Yeah.
To be soon.
DK, did you want to shout out where people can find you?
It's usually on this podcast or the Hit or Miss podcast or my social media. Again, like Will says, it's listed on the description.
Fair enough. Yeah. Awesome. And you can always find my listings in the description. I'm Ian Mike Wilson on Twitter. I'm just my name on Facebook, Instagram, etc. Discord, all that jazz. And you can find this podcast anywhere you get podcasts audio-wise or on YouTube. And as DK said, we also do the Hit or Miss Star Trek podcast, which is currently on break, but is coming back with a bit of a Who Game Show style treat soon, and then launching straight into our third time travel themed series in around September. So stay tuned for that. And
I will mention quickly, if you do want to listen to these guys on Spotify, I noticed that you can't just type in Silver Screen Podcast. You have to type in like Michael's podcast feed because that's the overarching name. So if you want to listen to like on Spotify or whatever, and I'm guessing audio streaming services, type in Mike's podcast feed and
I should have said that, yeah, because I have the silver screen and the Hit or Miss Star Trek on the same feed. Yes, if you are wanting to search out the audio, look for Mike's podcast feed, and you'll find both are in that feed there. So enjoy. And we will be back next week with a review of the biopic First Man. Myself and DK are going to be joined by Sandra Evanson, a first-time guest. That's going to be good. And it's also the first time that DK has seen this movie. He's yet to see it. So I'm intrigued to see his opinion. And join us for that. And in the meantime, DK, do you want to give us a quick sign-off?
Okay. In the words of Annie, I'll be back.